Welcome to the Franchise Woman podcast, where passion and purpose collide, profits are made, and relationships forged. I'm Rebecca Monet, CEO and Chief Scientist at Zoracle Profiles, along with my co-host, community advocate, speaker, author, and entrepreneur, Tracy Kawa. Our special guest today is Linda. And Linda, please pronounce your name for me so I don't butcher it.
Absolutely. Linda Ballesteros.
There you go, guys. Firsthand. As a certified franchise broker, Linda taps into her 30 years in banking, as well as her coaching background to guide and empower those who are seeking to build wealth and leave a legacy through owning a business. Linda has founded and led many business networking organizations where she mentored entrepreneurs in the value of building their business by building relationships. She's a professional life coach, an international best-selling author, as well as a speaker and radio show host. Her recent book, The Secret to All Things Franchising, How Franchising is the Secret to a Life of Passion, Purpose, and Prosperity, is a collection of stories from franchisors, franchisees, and others who support the franchise business model. Welcome, Linda.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here, ladies. I just really have a passion for helping women, and it sounds like that's your mission as well.
It is indeed. It is indeed. We're so glad to have you. You're one of my heroes. You know that.
Oh, you're so kind. You're so kind. I really believe that we're all sheroes.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah, in different ways, I suppose. That's very true, isn't it?
Yeah. I love the relationship that the two of you have. And Linda, I'm really excited, especially as a show host. I'm excited to hear about your experience with all of your radio shows and just along the way, the experiences that you've had interviewing other people. Can you tell us a little bit about some of your shows?
Oh, I would love to. I tell you what, back in 2008, I had a friend that had a radio platform, and he kept saying, Linda, you need to have a show. And he chased me for 6 months with this. And I'm thinking to myself, what do I have to say that would be so earth-shattering or so interesting that I would have a radio show?
Yeah.
When he explained to me that it was about my guest, and as long as I had really good guests and I asked good questions, then it would be a great show. So I got started, and I tell you what, I was so nervous that day. I had all of the herbs, like stress release herbs. I had lavender around my computer. I was so nervous. But my very first guest was a really good networking friend of mine. And the reason I brought her on the show, you mentioned relationships before. The reason I had her on the show was because I had bumped into her at networking events, the chamber events where there's 100 people there. Yeah. And, we shook hands, and I kind of knew what she did, but she was a little quirky, and I didn't really connect with her. And I thought, I had just kind of avoided her a bit until one day we had a one-on-one. Mm-hmm. And she told me her story. And her story was that her husband had been an offshore oil rig guy. And he was gone for several weeks, and he would come home. And they had a teenage son. And they were driving, and she always worried when he was out on the rig. Mm-hmm. And she felt comfortable when he was at home. One weekend when he was at home, they were hit head on by a drunk driver. He was killed instantly. She had lasting challenges, health challenges. They weren't sure she was going to live, and her son would have been an orphan at 16. And I thought to myself, that still gives me chills. I thought to myself, Linda, you would have missed out on a wonderful opportunity to know this beautiful soul. So that was when I said, oh, everybody has a story. Yeah. So I want to hear their story. So that's kind of what got me started into radio.
Oh, I love it. And it's so true. When we take the time to get to know someone, there's always a backdrop, there's always a story, there's always some passion, some overcoming situation, some, bucket lists are working. There's always something about them that if we take the time is fascinating. Um, and I think that's a part of it is taking the time because you weren't originally attracted
Not at all.
to her because there was some quirky. I tend to be attracted to quirky. So
yeah. Well, I certainly am now. I read a book a few years ago, and it described things perfectly. And I believe it was by Brian Glazner, and it was about curiosity. And if you go through life with this burning curiosity about people, about learning something new, then your life is going to be so much richer than if you think that, oh, I know what that's about. Sometimes we fall into that.
I got to tell you a story. I had a woman in my life. Her name was Yvonne. She was like a second mom to me. And when you would meet her, you would guess her much younger, not because she looked younger, but because of her energy and enthusiasm and passion. And one day we were out and just a little coffee shop up in the mountains because she loved to go see the desert and the mountains. So I would frequently drive her up. And someone asked her why she was so vital, why she had so much energy, why. And she stated pretty much what you stated. She says, I am insatiably curious. And that curiosity kept her mind active. It kept her engaged. It kept her learning, not just about her world. In this case, it was desert flowers that she was interested in, but also about other people. And I think this attribute of insatiable curiosity not only keeps us young, but allows us to continue to learn and have a passion for life. So that conversation has stuck with me now for probably 25 years. And I try to live my life with this insatiable curiosity. Tell me more. What else do you know? I want to know all about you kind of attitude.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It keeps us in a childlike state, right? Yeah. Always exploring, always wanting to know more. And it also helps us to fall in love, like, because we can fall in love with like people and places. We can fall in love with grandmas. We can fall in love with animals. And that in itself, like love, adds to the creative process, and it keeps our juices flowing and it keeps us alive. So my question for you, Linda, is getting back to this love of radio and love of hosting these shows that you've had. What have been some of your most memorable shows?
Yeah, thanks for asking that, because, the way we do radio anymore, just like we're doing today, you can interview anyone from around the world.
Yeah.
And I met people that in my everyday life, I would have never bumped into them. But another story of a networking connection was a very timid Asian lady that she and her husband had a computer business, and they did quite well in the community. And I remember someone saying, you need to have a conversation with her. Well, she's kind of quiet. I'm not. So I don't know how that's going to work, but I'll give it a try. And so when we started talking, I realized that she had that story. And when I heard that story, I immediately wanted her on the show. Her story was that she and her husband had lived in China. And when she was a very young girl, she was an activist. And so maybe you ladies remember the scene at Tiananmen Square.
Mm-hmm.
with the tank.
Yeah, and the students.
She led that initiative. She was the leader of that. She wasn't the person standing in front of that tank, but she was the leader. When that was over, she had to go underground for 3 years. She could not talk to her family. She could have no connections. She left the country and it took 3 years for the US to give her, and what is it called? The word I'm thinking, where she could come to the US.
Right.
And I am telling you, if you bumped into her at a chamber meeting, you would have never known that story. And that story was so much a part of her. And she was a part of history. She was a part of history. So that was a really interesting and moving show. And I would have never had that opportunity if I hadn't have had the radio show. If I'd had just a networking conversation with her, I wouldn't have been able to get that deep with her. So, that's just an example of how you can find out so much about people. And for me, the radio show was my vehicle.
Yeah.
That's a wonderful, wonderful vehicle. That story is amazing, how she ultimately got asylum, but this is someone with some incredible conviction. And I have found over the years, each of us has something we're very passionate about, or we're purpose-driven about, or a conviction. In this case, she had a very clear conviction, so much so she stood up, even though she was timid, even though she was shy, she stood up, stood her ground, and risked everything for it. That's a story that needs to be told. Thank goodness you gave her the platform to do that. I think in a day-to-day life, we need to give more people those kinds of platforms where it's not just how are you, and it looks like it's going to rain, or where did you go to school, but something that does get to that person's story, which in many ways becomes their identity. So if I don't have a radio show, Linda, and I'm just an average Joe or Joette, how do I get to that story with a potential client, a potential friend, a potential business partner? How do I get to that level of a conversation?
Yeah. And I believe that that is one of the things that I initially strive to when I meet someone. So when I teach networking, I say, when you meet with someone the first time and you think, I think we have very compatible services. I think we should be referral partners. You don't marry the first gal that you meet. You don't marry the first guy that you meet. How do you know that their ethics, the way they run their business, would make them a good fit? Their widget is not everything about their business. So I tell people, when you meet with someone the first couple of times, stay away from talking about business as much as possible, because they may be able to read their brochure to you. And that tells you all about their services and their widget. But if you're going to be referral partners, don't you want to know that when you refer someone, one of your hard-earned customers, when you refer them, that the other person will treat them with the same respect, with the same ethics, because if not, you could lose your customer. So it's important to first know, how do they operate their business? How are they at their core? Mm-hmm. And, this may sound kind of odd, but the first thing I try to do when I sit down is I really search for having a heart connection with that person. Yeah. And when I have that heart connection, they are comfortable now in sharing with me, because I've created a safe space for us to talk. And it has to be a conversation. It can't be an interrogation. So it's not a 20 questions thing. It is a conversation, and finding out what motivates them, what's important to them in life. Where do they want to be in a few years, or what's their vision? How has their vision changed over the last couple of years? So there are a lot of things that you can really connect with a person on a deeper level. But the main thing is it really has to be authentic. You really have to be genuinely interested. You can't go in with a list of questions that Linda Ballesteros said in the networking class that I need to ask these questions. You really have to be interested. And I think some of it still comes back to that curiosity.
Agreed.
Linda, do you think that there is a difference between the way men go about building relationships and the way women go about building relationships?
Absolutely, yes. I will tell you that my late husband, he was a big networker as well. So he led big networking events as well, executive networking events. And he would come home from an event and he would talk about a specific CEO maybe that he met. And I said, oh, really? Well, is he married, and does he have kids, or what part of town do they live in? And he would look at me with a blank face, like, I didn't even know those were questions I should ask. So, they do network differently. And I think understanding how to unfold that conversation, whether it's with men or whether it's with women, allows you to connect with them. So if I go up to a man in a networking event and say, hey, is your wife around, or what do the kids do? He would think it was a little creepy. Mm-hmm. So, you can get there, but not right off the bat. Now, women, we're naturally relationship builders. We're peacemakers. We have to if you've got kids. It's like Johnny and Mary, y'all quit fighting sort of thing. So with women, we can go straight to that place and then feel comfortable enough to know that I think we could do some business together. But with men, it's almost like it has to be, you have to prove yourself that you are able to carry the conversation. And it can't, one of the things that I teach in my classes is if women are going to a networking event where there are men, dress appropriately. Because if you don't dress appropriately, then it will come off as if you may be seeing this as a dating mix and mingle. Mm-hmm. And they won't take you seriously as a business owner.
Yes, and I've seen that in the world of franchising. We have many large events, mm-hmm. and that is a challenge that I see, especially for those beautiful women who mm-hmm. have pheromones everywhere that go to these events. They have to dial it back in many ways. But I do like this idea that the way we build a relationship when we're networking is different with a man. We need to take some time to build the credibility, the authority, kind of go to the head before we go to the heart. Where with a woman, we can get there a little faster, likely woman to woman. And it's interesting because I always feel I would rather go to a conference, an event, and have 5 deep, meaningful conversations than 50, what I call superficial relationships, where I walk away with business cards, but I don't walk away with a story. I don't walk away with a memory. I don't walk away with a feeling or an impression of that person, of who they really are at a core level. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of counterintuitive because especially when we go to these big events, it's like, how many business cards can we get? Because then we're going to do a follow-up email and try to sell them, right? But in the last few years, that's been more my approach. And I got to tell you, it's less exhausting. It's more fun. And those handful of relationships that come out of it then will usually lead to something else.
Rebecca, it's interesting you say that, because another thing that I teach in my workshops is when you go to a networking event, you take 3 business cards, like 1, 2, 3, only 3 business cards. You don't have a stash in the car that you can run back out and get some. You take 3 cards. And the reason I say 3 cards is exactly what you described, Rebecca, because if I only have 3 cards, I'm going to be very selective with who I have those conversations with. And I will have better conversations because I know, oh my gosh, I've only got 3 cards. Oh, I've only got 2 now. I was interviewed by a radio show up in New York, and the guy, when I brought that up to him, he said, well, Linda, that doesn't make any sense. What do you do when those 3 cards are, when you've given those 3 cards out? And I said, let me tell you a secret. This is real important. I want you to listen real close. You go home. You go home. Because if you're doing this 2 or 3 times a week, do you have enough time in your day to give the follow-up emails, to have those follow-up coffees with 10, 15, or 20 people if you're going to 3 or 4 networking events a week? No. So just stop. Just stop. And like you said, Rebecca, I was doing that 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. exhausted at the end of the day. And when I realized to be more strategic with networking, oh my gosh, the relationships were so much better. I didn't have to spend so much on business cards anymore. Yeah, I wasn't papering the room, which is what so many people think you're supposed to do at a chamber event where you've got 100 people. And it's not so.
You know, not only are the relationships better, but the quality of the referrals that come out of those relationships
definitely
are so much better, aren't they?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And if you have a substantial conversation with someone, they will remember you. How many times have you found business cards and you're going, where did I get that card? Who are these people? I don't know. I guess I'll just throw them away. Do you know, just 2 days ago, I had a call from someone that I met at a networking event. He was a visitor at a BNI chapter that I was a member of in Dallas, and we met 4 years ago.
Wow.
And he remembered me and is now ready to look at a franchise, and he called me. So if you have a good relationship, a good conversation with someone, it's going to stick with them.
It's going to be sticky. They call that sticky marketing, right?
There you go.
So another personal story to highlight what you're talking about. A few years ago, I was at an IFA conference, which, as you know, it was about 4,000 people go to these events. And there was a woman there, and she looked a little distraught. I knew her, not well, but I knew her. So I went over to her and spoke with her, and she began to tell me the story about having recently lost her mom, which was devastating. She was very close with her mom. And she began to tell me the story of the chaos between her and her brother with settling the estate, and how the family was torn apart with this. And you could just see the pain in her face and the words that she was sharing. So I just stopped everything, and we took off into a little corner. We sat down, and she poured her heart out. And at the end of it, I said, may I pray with you regarding the resolving this with your brother so you can move through this? And so that's exactly what we did. To me, everything else in that moment didn't matter. I don't care how much business was out there. This woman was in desperate need of a friend and of an ear and of some prayer. And so we stopped. Now, this was a few years ago. I cannot tell you how that relationship has continued to grow because of that, taking that extra 45 minutes or however long it was, and the referrals and the business, as Tracy pointed out, that came out of that. So I think your advice is spot on. And really,
no pun intended there.
No pun intended. I don't know where that came from. Just taking that extra little time to get to that. So I guess my question to you, Linda, regarding that is, how do we get to that story? You mentioned curiosity. You mentioned, just taking the time and slowing down and having those kinds of conversations. But what if someone is a little more aloof, a little more distant, not quite ready, and they are in that business kind of mode? How do you go through that, or do you just move on to someone else?
And sometimes I have to confess here, sometimes it doesn't happen on the first time you have coffee together. Sometimes it takes a while. There are my friend that I mentioned to you that had and still has the radio platform. He put me through tests early on to kind of see how I would respond. And evidently I passed the test because we've been friends since 2008. So, and wonderful relationships come out of these networking events and just networking. So I would say, for one thing, you don't push it.
Don't push it.
Don't push it. And maybe share something of yourself first so that they feel comfortable in that space to be able to maybe do the same. Maybe not this cup of coffee, maybe the next cup of coffee, but it's just about being patient to allow the relationship to blossom and to bloom.
Patience, one of my finer attributes.
Oh.
Rebecca, that reminds me in the trainings when you teach our classes to reveal your tender white underbellies.
Tender underbelly, yes.
Yeah.
Reveal something about yourself first.
People love that saying, by the way. There's something like, oh, especially when we let people know we all have a tender underbelly.
Right.
And I would really like to hear about your tender underbelly, because I care about you, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But,
yeah, exactly.
The patience piece is so important. A relationship isn't built in a 15-minute interaction. It is something you have to invest in, which goes back to your point, Linda, that if I have 100 people I'm supposed to trying to build a relationship rather than 3, you're just not going to have that kind of time to build those kinds of relationships. So, oh my God.
And you don't have the physical energy. I don't care how healthy you are. I don't care what vitamins you take. You physically can only do so much in a 24-hour period.
True. All right, before we shift gears, any other networking, relationship building tips you can give our listeners, which is to slow down, get to know someone, take some time to do so, reveal. I think that's a big one for me. If they're not ready to share the tender underbelly or reveal the heart or talk to you about more than just, here's my widget, it's really cool, that reveal a piece of yourself. Is there any other pieces of advice that you would give to someone that wants to do a better job building relationships and doing a better job networking?
Yeah, I think, and I appreciate that question because as business owners, sometimes we go in with a script in our head. We've practiced it the whole way in the car, what we're going to say. Okay, so this is what I'm going to say, and I'm going to talk about my new special, and I'm going to do this. And what I say in my networking training is, don't be the first to talk. because let me give you an example. Say I have a dog walking service. I am passionate about dogs. Oh my gosh, furry animals. I just adore them. And so I get in and I'm just bubbling about how much I love animals and this pet service that I have. And I just am, I love all breeds. Well, the person standing in front of me tells me that they're allergic to dogs. I've used some of my really good material on someone who probably will never be a client for mine. So if you allow the other person to talk first, for one thing, it gets that script out of their head. They're gonna say it. So let them do it to begin with. Let them run that script, get it out of their head, because they cannot hear you until they get that script out of their head. Because the whole time you're talking, they're thinking, okay, what am I going to say? Okay, so now this is what I'm going to, they're not hearing one word you say. So let them talk first. Let them get it out.
That's a great point, because so many people have just grilled their elevator pitches into their own brains, and they feel like this is the exact sentence I have to say. Let me just spew it out. And then, but at least once it comes out of their mouths, they're relieved. They've said what they had to say. And now you can get to know the person. I love that.
Exactly. And, you know, Rebecca, you just went, phew. A lot of times you can almost see them do that. It's that body language. You can almost see them relax. And so now you can say what you came to say, but you have enough information too to customize now what you're going to say to them, because they've shared with you a little bit about themselves. So now you can kind of customize what you're going to say to whatever they, you know, whatever their pain points are or whatever might interest them.
Yeah, it's absolutely brilliant, because you do get to their motivators, their values, their pain points just in that elevator pitch that Tracy was talking about, or when they're sharing a little bit about themselves. You now can calibrate that as you're sharing and relating. And also, if you're coming from a place like you mentioned earlier of insatiable curiosity, you can ask more questions.
Right.
How did you get involved with that? You know, that's fascinating. Tell me more about this other thing you just told me. So now that there's this interest in them, and the law of reciprocation is one where if you show that level of curiosity and interest sincerely, they're going to show it back. They're going to want to know more about you too. So the let them talk first idea is brilliant, unless of course they don't, at which point then you slowly reveal yourself, or then that will allow them to do that. Oh my gosh.
I have a question that I'm really curious about. It just popped in my head. Linda, can you share with us your favorite icebreaker question?
Yeah. So what I say about icebreakers, or before, when I go through my networking training, I have it broken up in different sections. And the first one is how to prepare before you even go to the event. Now, this does not mean prepare your elevator pitch, your 30-second, 60-second, whatever. I always say, before you step out, just Google, see if maybe there's a new company coming into town. See if there's something going on in the community that might be of interest. I can't tell you how many times I've gone to a chamber event and they go, oh man, the traffic was horrible getting here. No one's going to remember me, because that's the same question everybody else asks. Now, if I say, you know, I just read where ABC company is moving to the area and they're bringing in 500 new employees. How do you think that's going to impact our community here?
Wow.
Now, that's a conversation.
That is great. So what you're doing is you're finding something that's a commonality and outside of either scope of what you do or that person does. Yep. That's brilliant. I love that.
I do too. And it's not about the weather. or the
No,
traffic,
it's not about the weather or the traffic
or politics,
that's a no-no. Yeah.
but something that likely could affect everyone who is there, or at least they'll have some kind of opinion about, so they get to share.
Mm-hmm. That especially works well when you're networking with men, because you've asked a question that proves to them the very first time they meet you that maybe she does know what's going on. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. She knows more than just how to cook dinner. That's for sure.
Just more than just a pretty face.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, she's in the know. This girl's in the know.
Yeah.
Right. That's what we want. All right. I want to shift gears just a little bit, Linda, with your permission. And I want to talk about this event that you have coming up, the Great Resignation. Tell us a little bit more about what that's all about.
Sure. There is a movement these days, Rebecca, and it is called the Great Resignation. And you know it's a real movement when it has its own hashtag.
We lost Linda. She'll come back.
There we go. Hi, Linda.
I am so sorry.
No worries. We were just starting to tell us about this movement, the Great Resignation.
Yeah, the Great Resignation, and it's a real thing when it has its own hashtag, right? So you can search hashtag the Great Resignation, and you'll find out anything and everything you've wanted to know. But what has happened, ladies, is that during the pandemic, and I call it the Great Pause, because during that pause, we all had an opportunity to reevaluate how we were spending our time, how we were earning money, what any of that looks like. And because of that, more people are looking at a different opportunity, or looking at other options, I should say, to earn money. And maybe they no longer want to spend 2 hours a day commuting to and from the job because, well, for the last 18 months, I've been doing it here at home. So what else could I do at home and be more in control of it? So one of the things that we are seeing is that more people are looking at franchising, especially corporate people, because they're used to having a system. And that's what franchising is. It provides you with that system. So this event that we're doing is you're going to be hearing from a franchisee, an area franchise developer, myself as a franchise consultant, and an online marketer. You can find out more information either by emailing me at linda@MPower Franchise Consulting. That's the letter M, the word power, franchiseconsulting.com. Or you can just go to the website, and it is www.tinyurl.com/The Great Resignation. It'll be a great time to get information, and it's online. And if you miss that date, then you'll be happy to know that we're recording it, and I can send you the link. So the date doesn't matter. Just send me an email, and I'll send you the link to the recording.
I'm looking forward to that event, and having been in the franchise space almost 30 years now, these last 18 months really have been a time for people to reevaluate their lives and decide what really is a priority in their life. Well, do they want to do that commute? Do they want more time with their children? Did their job not offer them a place to express a purpose or their true talent? So they're reassessing everything in their lives and reorganizing it in such a way that it's making more sense. And so naturally, part of that reassessing one's life is looking at other ways of expressing myself, other ways of making a livelihood. And franchising is a great option for those kinds of people that want more flexibility, want more control, want to have a greater contribution, want more time with family, want to leave a legacy, all of those things that maybe consciously we didn't think about when we were on autopilot going to, putting on our suits and going to the office, right? So this last several months, because of the pandemic, has allowed us to look at life and where we are in it and what we want to accomplish. So I love that you're doing this for folks. Again, if you don't mind, tell people how they can find this event.
Sure. You can email me, Linda, at the letter M, the word power, franchiseconsulting.com, or you can go to the website, and that is www.tinyurl.com/the Great Resignation.
Perfect. Tracy, any final words before we let Linda go?
I'm just ready to go to my very first in-person networking event after all of this and implement some of these amazing gems that you just dropped on us.
Wonderful. I look forward to hearing about it.
Absolutely. You got a deal.
Okay.
Thank you, Linda, for spending time with us. We so appreciate you carving out the time and sharing your wisdom so generously.
I appreciate the invitation, ladies. It's been such a pleasure. I love it. Thank you.
Absolutely. And the rest of you that are listening, thank you for listening in on the Franchise Woman podcast, where passion and purpose collide, profits are made, and relationships are forged. We'll see you next week on another show.